Sam Moonsky signing on.
What influences our fashion choices? What comes to mind for you? Does it have to do with where you live? How does your lifestyle factor into what your outfit choices are? Do you think about what the recent trends are? Is social media playing into your wardrobe? And maybe you even consider what silhouette fits your body best. How about music? How much of a role does the music you enjoy have to do with your fashion picks? Now, I don't mean that your wardrobe is compiled of sequins, heart cut out dresses like Miss Carpenter, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't peek at the last Le Fleur drop by Tyler. We love to emulate, even in some small way, the people that make the art we love. So, this video, we're going to be talking about 90s music and its impact on fashion. We're going to be specifically discussing grunge fashion. Now, because fashion decades don't neatly fit into 80s, 90s, 2000s, we're going to keep this category focused on grunge and grunge adjacent. I'm going to be mentioning some fashion choices related to some grunge bands that overlapped with some non grunge bands. But what exactly is grunge? Well, as defined by Google, grunge refers to grime and dirt, and honestly, I don't think that's too far off from the vibe these artists were trying to capture. No, but seriously, the grunge movement originated out of Seattle, Washington. It's a style of rock known for its fuzzy quality and angst. It had this indie punk with great sense of ennui sound to it. So these are the characteristics of grunge. Now, some of the biggest legends of grunge and the adjacent were at the forefront, of course, Nirvana. Kurt Cobain is specifically who we're going to be looking at here. Lots of what we relate to grunge are Cobain inspired fashion choices that came out of this era. There were also artists like Bikini Kill, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden. There was also Babes in Toyland, Sonic Youth, Smashing Pumpkins, and Alice in Chains, to name a few. So, about the fashion, grunge had some hallmarks of 90s fashion, starting off with patterns. Boy, oh boy, were there patterns and textures galore. Pattern mixing was also very common. Not too many sandwich methods going on here. Patterns were plaids, florals, and stripes, of course. You're going to notice that there is a lot of overlaying, a lot of layers where you normally might not consider them with clothing items that you might not consider. So, biking shorts under cargo shorts was a go. The layered pieces actually had to do with where this style was coming out of, which was the North Pacific West, where weather can fluctuate and you may need to layer more. Ripped or distressed clothes was also pretty big at this point, a lot of not so new clothes. The other part of it was accessories. Accessories played a pretty big role in the 90s fashion scene, pins on everything. The DIY part of clothes was in, and it was a way to personalize clothes. Pins, when we're talking again about the messages that we're trying to put out, pins did play a role in this. You would take a pin that represented you, which was part of the messaging that you were trying to put out there. And because grunge was part of rock music, kind of this offshoot of inspired by punk, there were politics involved, there were new ideologies involved. Some of the other accessories involved were these black string necklaces. There were a lot of chokers. There was a lot of studded spikes. And of course, I cannot leave out Kurt Cobain's iconic sunglasses. We're also seeing the use of tights, including ripped tights, because nothing is new. Then going into makeup, the makeup was a lot more alluring, even slept in. And you can tell by these thin eyebrows and dark lipsticks, this was peak 90s, right? So over here, you're also seeing a picture of Bikini Kill, all in bright red lipstick. The lipstick was also part of their whole message. Bikini Kill, one of the bands out of the Riot Grrrl scene, red lipstick, you get it. And body modification, there's a lot of piercings. at this point in time. Um, Piercings also became a staple. And today we find ourselves trying to recreate the look of looking moody and dark and romantic. But a lot of the times people end up falling short. And if you're not looking like the cover whole, you are doing it too clean. While these recreated looks are gorgeous, it is just not giving dirt, you know. Moving over to hair, hair was a pretty big part here too. Hair was messy, it was playful, as you'll see by these thick, chunky highlights, and you'll also see colored hair. There was a lot of hairstyles popular, but we saw a lot of men with longer hair and also women with shorter hair. And obviously, you're going to have your white people with dreads. There was quite a bit of those as I was going through these 90s pictures. Again, we're talking about a message that is in line with not fitting the mold. And while not loving the look, it was a thing. And then we also saw a lot of combat boots, of course, the Doc Martens and the army jackets that came out of the grunge scene. Army jackets by people who obviously were not veterans, and combat boots by people who were not engaging in combat beyond the mosh pit. This had to do a lot with where people were buying their clothes. So the thrift stores were booming in the 90s. Part of the appeal of 90s grunge was how accessible it was. It didn't require a lot of money. Teenagers could access it because you could easily buy all of the fashion looks that you needed to feel just like grunge musicians at the thrift store as they did. So the thrift store was a very big part of grunge fashion. And again, as I mentioned, because a lot of the clothing that was being put out or that was being worn was thrifted, and what was available was not tailored, a few new silhouettes came out of this. So we see these very oversized baggy pants being held up by shoelaces. We see smaller, tighter fitting t-shirts. Again, this has to do a lot with consuming less and making it work, and then it kind of is a cyclical effect. As long as so people are buying their clothes from a thrift store, it's probably not fitting the right way, and they are still making it work. And then because other people are seeing them make it work, it keeps getting worn. We also saw a little bit more expression with the clothing options that were worn by men and women. There was less of a binary line in and where you could shop, what you could shop. And there was also a big influence by skater fashion in the grunge scene. So that also inspired some of this oversized fit in the clothes. We even saw a lot of Drew Barrymore participating in this grunge fashion silhouette. But like all good things, corporations need into. Some things must be co opted by the wealthier party so they can profit. And that brings me to the Marc Jacobs line of 1993 for Perry Ellis. So in 1993, 29-year-old Marc Jacobs put out a fashion line under Perry Ellis's sports fashion brand inspired by grunge. It was an homage to grunge, as you'll see by all the mixing of patterns, all the overlays. Over here, we're also seeing combat boots, even pink ones. There's also a lot of hats being worn, which is pretty typical of grunge looks. This fashion line wasn't received too well, and Marc Jacobs was fired from Perry Ellis, and the line was pulled before even being released. There are great photos that came out, opt it, and Marc Jacobs obviously made that work for him. But again, this co opting styles of fashion, worn for the sake of rebellion and accessibility, being for a richer audience, stripping the point of it. We also have the same grunge concept done by Anna Sui in 1993 in her Reday to Wear fashion collection through her own line. We see a lot of colorful stripes, a lot of purples, a lot of moody makeup, looks dark eyes, dark lipstick. There's a lot of chunky shoes and the lace and all of it. You can see that there is layers on layers where they don't necessarily feel intuitive. Anna Sui did not get the same backlash as Marc Jacobs because this was her own brand, but still it's very interesting. How we see the grunge looks being worn by the runway models, it kind of ended up feeling like a Nirvana t-shirt being put on Amazon, which if you are watching this, you probably understand how ironic this is, especially knowing who Kurt Cobain was and knowing that he and Courtney Love ended up burning the Marc Jacobs collection that was mailed to them as well. But as we see in the last few years, a lot of these Hallmark mentioned have resurfaced in the fashion realm and are being revitalized in this very cool new way. Let me know in the comments if you are still rocking any of these grunge highlights. That's all for this video, so thanks for tuning in. Let me know what era I should cover next or what music genre fashion you'd be interested in hearing about next. Adios.